All right, it's recording. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. I do want to express my appreciation to our esteemed panel of FIU alumni. So our speakers are alumni from our program, and they're here to talk about career pathways after they graduate with their EDS. So our students are all first-year students. I'm sure they're very excited to hear about the pathways that each of you took. There were a set of questions, but before we do that, I would look for each speaker to share a little bit about who you are and what your position and where you're at right now. So I'm just going to go based on whom I see on the screen. So we'll start with Dr. James Stuckey.
Wow. Okay. How's my mic? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, although your video just, oh, there we
Okay.
go. Now we
There
see.
we go.
Great.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, first off, thank you, Dr. Pham, for inviting me. It's great to come back to FIU and look at all these wonderful, young faces ready to take on the world of school psychology. I applaud you and congratulate you on your progress so far. Um, I am a school psychologist in Palm Beach County. I grew up in Georgia, eventually relocated down south. I taught for a while. I was like an elementary school teacher for many, many years and really enjoyed it. But I just didn't see myself retiring as a teacher. I wanted to stretch myself and challenge myself to do something more. Wanted to have a bigger voice to advocate for students. So that really led me to the path of becoming a school psychologist. At one of those open welcome back to school open house meetings, our school psychologist gave some presentation, and I was like, wow, I was really impressed. She actually went to she actually went to FIU, Shannon Bunn. She's a school psychologist who I work with now. So she really inspired me, and that year I ended up enrolling in the graduate program. Yeah, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to all of your questions and your the discussion today.
Great. Thank you, James. Let's see what I see. Renee, Bastian.
Hi, everybody. I'm Renee. I graduated from FIU 2022, spring 2022, I want to say.
I think that sounds
Um,
about right.
that seems like a million years ago, but I'm in my third year as a school psychologist. I'm in Broward County. So if anybody has Broward questions, I can answer those. Um, anyway, while I was at FIU, I was SPSA president, different things like that. So um, yeah, I love FIU so much. I'm wearing an FIU shirt today. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Thank you, Renee. Queenie Dong.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see some familiar faces. I miss everyone. Miss FIU. I'm actually currently a doctoral candidate at UC Berkeley. So right after I finished my EDS in school psych there at FIU, I moved to California, Northern California, and that's where I've been at for the last 3 years, going on 4 now. So I graduated from FIU in spring 2021. Yeah, love my time there. It's been amazing. Love the field of school psychology. Hence, that's why I committed to another whole degree after this, and it's been nothing but great. I did my internship at Broward as well. And yeah, but I went straight right after finishing up the program into another program. So we'll be speaking from anybody interested in continuing your education and potentially pursuing a doctorate.
Great. Thanks, Queenie. Melissa Torres.
Hi everybody. It's just so crazy to be here and be like talking to students who are like now going into the same path that we took. But I'm a school psychologist with Miami-Dade County. I'm currently back at FIU. I graduated in 2023. And now I'm back at FIU pursuing my PhD in teaching and learning with a focus in special education. Um, my journey in special education is a little personal. I was a special education student myself, and so that experience kind of shaped my commitment to helping students just like me. But in a sense, it almost feels like I'm giving back to the community that supported me when I needed it the most. But yeah, so now basically what I'm doing right now is gathering as much information as I possibly can in the field and trying to figure out what exactly I'm going to do my research on. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, I can definitely gear them towards Dade County, because I'm very much familiar with it. I was a teacher for about 5 years, and then I became a school psych, so pretty familiar with it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Melissa. And I see our fifth speaker, Miss Mirtha Brennan, whom I'm actually also meeting for the first time. So, Mirtha, would you share a little bit about yourself to our first year students?
Hi, it's nice to be here. I'm sorry I'm late. My daughter is sick and I had to take her to the doctor. So I was like trying to hurry up and log in.
No worries.
So let's see. I've been a school psychologist for 19 years. I graduated from FIU 2005. So that makes me old. So I worked in Miami-Dade County Public Schools as a school psychologist. For 17 years, right before I came to Tallahassee. So I served various roles, but always as a school psychologist, RTI district chair, trainer. And the last 7 years, I was a chairperson in Dade County. And then I came here to Tallahassee, and I'm now the state school psych consultant. Um, what else can I tell you? My kids are fighting behind me. Sorry.
No worries. We don't hear anything. You're good.
Okay. And then I think, I really pretty much exposed myself to as many opportunities as I could in Dade County. I want to say one of my best experiences was being part of the crisis response team. And I worked with Frank Zaneri, who was also an FIU graduate and contributor to many, things in the field. But I did, I went to the Uvalde school shooting response in Texas. That's part of the reason that prompted like my move to come to the state. I wanted to kind of try to help make things, safer and better for kids who are struggling. So that brings me to this new journey.
Thank you. So as I mentioned before, there were questions that students had created beforehand, but feel free to also ask questions in the chat, particularly as speakers are talking about their experiences. So I don't know if we'll get through all the questions, but I'll select several. But again, feel free to also put some questions in the chat as well. So I'll start with the first question, and anyone can speak first. What inspired you to pursue a career as a school psychologist?
I can go for this one. So in undergrad, I had a psychology major, and somewhere around my sophomore year, I started taking more abnormal psych classes, clinical psych classes, and things like that, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with psychology. I knew I wanted to work with kids. And so I thought I wanted to be a school counselor for a little while. I took an internship at DCF to see if I wanted to be a social worker. I just tried different internships. Whoever would like let me work with them, whatever agency, whatever company, whatever, I would, take an internship or something like that to kind of feel out different areas. And during my junior year, my clinical psych professor encouraged me to essentially look into school psychology. He's like, you're bright, you can do counseling, but you can do a lot more than counseling. Like, look into this field. And so I did, and I ended up getting an internship at a private practice, and that was it for me. That's when I knew that this is what I wanted to do. I had a great time learning about the different assessments and observing them and scoring assessments and all kinds of things. And so through that internship is when I really was like, okay, great, this is what I want to do.
I'll go
Yeah.
next. I think
Go
I
ahead.
have a similar story.
Yeah.
So I was teaching at a charter school, and I was like, okay, I really like being in the classroom because I started out as a sub, and then I finally got a permanent position as a teacher, and I was like, oh, wait, I really like this. And then I got very, very interested in school counseling because my background is psychology. And so I figured, oh, counseling is what I definitely want to do. So I actually applied to the program at FIU and I got accepted to school counseling. And then I think it was like halfway through my first semester, I was like, wait, actually, I don't know if I want to do this. Like, I think I like more of the testing and that aspect more than I do of the counseling. Um, because I was also noticing that the school counselor at the school that I was at, more so had a role that wasn't really her role, but they basically made her very much like a disciplinary kind of role. And I was like, no, no, that's not what I want. So then that's when I reached out to Dr. Pan. I'm like, hi, what can I do? Like, I really want to do school psychology instead. And so that's how I got into the program. But I think for sure it started when I was younger. I went to school during the time that FCAT was around. And I didn't pass the FCAT. And so, but I was a very social kid. Nobody would have ever known that I had zero idea how to read in the third grade. And so in the third grade, that's when they did an entire, psychoeducational evaluation. And they were like, yeah, she has no idea how to read. We've missed it completely. And so now there I was in third grade having to repeat the grade again. And that comes with its own psychological issues with regard to seeing your friends move on, social anxiety, things of that nature. So it was a huge eye opener for me. And so when it came time to choose a career, I was like, okay, for sure, like I want to definitely be in education because I loved the environment of the school, but I definitely wanted to be more so involved with that one-on-one with a student who was going through some difficult times. And so I feel like being as a school psychologist now, I definitely get to meet kids just like me who maybe were super social, but lack skills within academics or perhaps have a learning disability that nobody else necessarily sees, right? Um, to help. So that's one of the reasons why I truly decided to go into school psych. But I think it's going to happen to most of you as well. I think when you become a school psychologist, that you really start to work with kids and you start to kind of have like a caseload and whatnot. It's like a newfound love for it in the sense that before I always knew I wanted to be a school psych, but now when you start seeing kids and you start seeing them improve, you're like, wow, like I did that or I had a part in that. And so it gives you a real sense of excitement and fulfillment, I think. So yeah.
Thanks. Others? Queenie or Mirtha? Yep. Mirtha?
Yes. Okay. So I just wanted to switch topics for a little bit, because I know one of the questions I think was about something that was challenging. I think when I first became a school psych and I was assigned to a school, I was very nervous, because when I was doing my internship, I looked to my supervisor and they always kind of guided you and you're in these meetings and sometimes, you get to take the lead after a while, but you always have kind of like a safety net. But then when I was assigned and I had my own schools, right, everyone's looking at me for the answers. And I was like, oh, okay, it's on me. So sometimes that transition, I think, for your first year could be a little bit scary and challenging. So I did, try to keep in touch and can always reach out to someone in the district that if you're hired at the district where you did your internship, you may have already that relationship with your previous supervisor that you can always reach out to. But I think the main thing is just, don't be afraid to ask questions. A lot of the things also is like on the job training, right? Because there's a lot of district procedures and those you learn as you're working. So I think it's just, um, you're there to do your job and other things, one part of it you learn as part of your program, which is the assessments and evaluations, and then procedures, which are very specific to the district. Those come as, you're in that job. So just, be kind to yourself and just know that you'll start to feel confident and, a lot more confident as time goes on, because it does take a couple years to I think, feel very proficient with all those procedures and things like that. So I just wanted to say that.
Dr. Pham, just to
Yes.
piggyback on what you were saying, I was a teacher for a long time, and growing up, I didn't even know what a school psychologist was. I didn't have any experience with a school psychologist. I just kind of went through school, and no one really, tested me or worked with me or anything. I thought about the guidance because I had a relative who was a guidance counselor, but like the other person said, the guidance counselor was always pulled to do, A, B, C, and D, everything but counsel kids. And I knew I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be able to really work in the field that I studied and practiced for. Um, and again, just wanted to have a bigger voice to be able to advocate for boys and girls beyond just my classroom setting. Yeah. And just as a footnote, um, last year when I taught at Barry University, I met one of your students. It's great to see Melissa again.
Oh,
Hi,
that's right.
Melissa.
Melissa came from here. That's right.
Hey, Dr. Stuckey, good to see you.
Small world. Thanks, Jays. Others wanted to share? Since
I'll
Meredith, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, uh, I was going to chime in with that last question around what inspired me to pursue a career as a school psych. I can't really pinpoint necessarily like one pinnacle or like one salient event that said, that's it, this was school psych. I think it was a series of decisions that led me down this path that ultimately reinforced itself. So I will say I feel lucky to even have come across the path of becoming a school psychologist because I also did not know what a school psychologist was very much, even thinking about researching like what is school psychology and then coming across NASP, reading the whole website. I thought I knew. And now, even after what, like 7 years into this too, I will say I'm still learning. And all to say, I think what brought me through that is just different ways of seeing this role as so fluid and like thinking about as our role in education, we have so many wonderful avenues to impact the lives of students and their families, whether through the lens of mental health or understanding disabilities and advocating for students and families and or working through systems level work and whether you're working in school districts and or beyond at state levels and being a part of a big system in that way, it's fascinating. So it's ever evolving. I feel like I've been continuously inspired to stay in school psychology, which I think is something that continues to interest me around like whether we're thinking about the retention and how we're retaining our school psychologists. But I do think our role is so important, and that's what has kept me going and wanting to continue down this. And I hope all you are able to find your source of inspiration in pursuing this career, but also continuing to find those growth edges and those learning curves that push us, to really reach another level of like this work. Because I think it's very much evolving all the time. And as reflective of this entire panel too, we all have had very different experiences with very similar backgrounds of coming through FIU and going through the school psychology program.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is interesting how a lot of us sort of stumble upon school psychology, and now we're different paths in terms of our careers or doctoral studies or practitioners or as consultants. So it's very interesting. And even just for me, James was one of my first students, and then I never had Bertha as a student, but just seeing a lot of the growth from as a student to as professionals is it's also very I feel very proud. So thank you. Merita was talking a little bit about challenges or issues in the first few years after graduating. Can our panel speak more to that? And if there are any resources or suggestions or advice on how to mitigate some of these issues or challenges?
Can I go briefly?
Yeah,
I promise
absolutely.
to be brief.
Go
Um,
ahead.
for me, teaching was such a happy space. I felt like my classroom was happy, and my families that I work with, the kids were happy and everything. But in psychology, you're going to run into some cases that are sad, where a child may be experiencing some trauma, and family life can be difficult. So that was one of my biggest challenges, having to manage through that, and just remembering to practice self-care, remembering that I'm working with a multidisciplinary team. There are so many other resources within the school system. It's not all just on me, so I don't have to carry everything. A lot of people are going to be working to help support that child and that family, and there are so many resources available. So when you do get to your school or placement or internship, really familiarize yourself with other support staff, the behavior health professional, the co-located therapist, the guidance counselors, because they're going to have resources that you can use to refer out. Um, And that'll also help you manage those kind of sometimes sad cases, you know? And just when you think you've had a sad case, you're going to come across that gifted testing, and the kid's going to have gifted scores, and the family's going to be happy, the kid's going to be happy, and you're going to bounce back.
You others?
I'm gonna say, don't underestimate the power of relationships that you make in your schools and the networking aspect of the job. I can't tell you how many times my first year I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like you have those moments where you're like, oh my God, am I doing this right? And I made it a point during my internship year to make friends. And like I actually had a practicum supervisor who was very quiet herself. Like she was not the type of person to network at all. And I forced myself, even though it would have been very easy to sit beside her, I forced myself to talk to other people, to make friends. And it really helped me my first year because I felt comfortable reaching out to others in the same, the same field and asking them for help. I think one of the other challenges I'm currently facing is the sometimes lack of support in terms of like resources when it comes to testing. So for example, like our online scoring, it runs out and then you don't know when you're going to get that again. So now we're having to maybe drive a place to get the manual to hand score it. So like little things like that that in the beginning I didn't even think were going to be an issue, and now I'm like, oh my God, this is a real challenge. Um but one of our biggest words in Dade County is pivot. So learn to be flexible, learn to pivot whenever possible, because there are going to be a lot of times where you are going to have to pivot. But yeah.
Good advice. Others?
Yes. I'll go. So I think one of the things was really just learning, some of the procedures, like I mentioned, being able to access the manual, kind of familiarize myself with those steps. Like Melissa said, I think, having those relationships with the people that you work with and definitely being flexible. And I think, there's sometimes this camaraderie with your first year sites, and sometimes the district, can have support for your first year or early career sites. So that's also a good way to, be able to be kind of problem solve and work with everyone together. So I think it's just a big, learning opportunity those first couple of years. And, like, again, don't be afraid to ask for help, work with those people around you, because you definitely, have a lot of other staff that you can work with.
I think there are a couple of challenges. So I'm in my third year now. I also did my internship in Broward. Of course, there are like systems level things that everybody kind of doesn't like about, working within a school district, like, oh, because of such and such rule, I can't qualify this child, or I have to do this little piece of an evaluation, even though I know, different things like that. But above and beyond that, I think balance. Yeah, what's in the chat? Is there a good way to balance being flexible without spreading yourself too thin? This is one of those jobs where you can plan and schedule whatever you want for the week, but if you're, planning to pull a kid for an evaluation, but now there's a crisis and you have to go do behavioral threat assessment, that's something that could take the time away. Or if, oh, this meeting is about to happen, or, there's just a lot of different little fires to put out throughout the day. So I think time management is super important in this role, because you're going to have to manage timelines for whatever number of cases you have. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 45. Like you don't know how many you're going to be juggling at, any given time. So time management becomes really important. And in that same kind of category, self-care is important as well, because if you're not physically well or something like that, that's going to impact how you're able to do the job. If you're not mentally in it, that's going to slow you down and impact how you do the job as well. So I think balance is the challenge.
James?
Yeah, am I the only school psych from Palm Beach County here? I think
You
so,
are.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, because okay. It's just in terms of pivoting and being flexible, I understand that's really important, and we all have to do that at times, but I think it's so important when we're working with students and we're deciding eligibility for, learning disabilities and other programs, that we still select the right assessment tools for the right student. Because as we all know, with diverse populations, one assessment tool may not be able to show all the strengths of that one child. I remember during my internship, my supervisor, he really loved the whisk. He thought the whisk was the best thing in the world, and every kid he ever came across, he wanted to whisk them. And I knew from my training at FIU that some kids aren't able to perform the best at the whisk. They won't get their highest score. You won't see their greatest potential. So just in terms of that whole pivoting thing, pivot, of course, you have to be flexible, but always be selective and find the right assessments tools for that particular student. And not just have some cookie cutter set of, okay, these are the kits I use and I only use these.
Wonderful. Others? Okay, so there is a question in the chat from Luz. Are school psychologist members of the union, and does the union cover fees in case of a lawsuit against the school psychologist?
In Palm Beach County, yes. However, it's strongly recommended that you have your own, just in case. But yeah, we're part of the teacher union, and our collective bargaining group would be with the teachers as well.
The same in Broward, where we can join the union, we're part of it.
I would say the same in Miami-Dade, correct? Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, same in my.
Great. All right, let's see. There are specific questions I'll ask. So one from Mirtha. So this came from a student. I would like to ask Mirtha Brennan how she describes her role as a school psychologist consultant for the Florida Department of Education.
That is a very good question. So I've been there less than 2 years, and I provide a lot of technical assistance to districts, other school psych department chairs, ESC directors in regards to child fine, Section 504 and just the different eligibility categories, but it's really providing technical assistance. Sometimes I've done trainings for different districts. So it's kind of a little bit of everything, more, training, providing guidance. I do have to say, and I admit, I do miss being in a school. I do miss being part of a school team, and I do miss working directly with students because I did enjoy that the most, obviously. But it's been a change, and I've learned a lot of different things, being at the state, that I really wasn't aware of before, like looking at all the statutes and laws and things like that, which, are very interesting. And I do speak a lot also to parents. So I provide a little bit of everything with that technical assistance. Sometimes I do have psychologists who call me to ask me questions specifically, for evaluations or things like that. So it's quite a mix, I have to say. One of the other things that I do is the mental health. Every year Florida gets the mental health assistance allocation. So there's funds distributed to districts in order to kind of prevent and kind of work on students' mental health. So I've learned a lot through that whole process. So it's been just a lot of really interesting things that impact all the districts, right, across the board. And I get to see a lot of what districts do differently based on their own procedures. I only know one way, and I'm used to thinking, well, that's just the way it is because I worked in a district for so long, and then I realized, oh yeah, but districts do have different procedures as well. So I feel like I'm back in graduate school, honestly, because I've done so much reading and so much learning, and I love to learn new things. So yeah, that's about it.
I just have a follow-up. How did you end up in that position? And yeah, how did you end up as a consultant? at the FLDOE?
So I received a phone call from the previous consultant that position, was going to be available, and I was encouraged to apply. And I had been thinking about it. I had seen it available previously, a couple years before that. So it was just kind of word of mouth, and then I applied, and I interviewed. So I think a lot of times those positions at the state level are word of mouth through someone because it was even hard for me to find it even once it was posted. So that's how that happened.
Yeah. Just another question for Queenie. This is from a student. How have your research experiences impacted your outlook on the field of school psychology? And what do you hope to do with your knowledge of the current research after you receive your doctorate?
Very big question. Regardless whether or not I decided to go into this doctorate route, like there's just so much to learn in school psychology. The 2 years of coursework and the year of internship is like scratching the surface when it comes to then, at least for myself, the last few years, really submersing myself in research. It has shifted my thinking a lot in regards to our field in school psychology. Some points of contention I've feel like from practice to research, there's these gaps that exist that I'm really leaning into that I find interesting and yet kind of frustrating in the ways in which we hold both a dual role, like as a scientist practitioner model in our training. We are trained to be practitioners, but also thinking through the ways in which research informs our work and thinking through that, I feel like that's where I see the importance of our research, but also being grounded in the work that's being done in schools. I guess specifically, though, some of the research work that I've been engaged in is very, very different from what maybe you would think school psychology may lean into. I've been working as a graduate student researcher with a state center that provides professional development and learning opportunities to a lot of educational leaders across the state of California. It's like a state-funded grant that provides a sort of PD and communities of practice, but it's this idea of like, how do we support the adults within the school system? So we're thinking about teachers and principals, assistant principals, and all those in between, and looking at their well-being and how that is a component into understanding how they're in a way affecting how they support students. So a lot of the research I've leaned into is thinking about educator burnout, the retention and of educators of color within school systems. And yeah, going back to that, that's not very school psych in some ways, but it kind of is. I think in the lens that we think about our consultation models and how we collaborate, I think as the role of a school psychologist, this is maybe sometimes underutilized as far as how we think of supporting our educators as we consult and collaborate with our teachers and our principals. And that in turn also informs the ways they are better to serve students. Because I think in the role of school psychs, we know that we're not the first adults that maybe students will be able to see. It's their teacher, who they see almost every day. So that's led me down that path alongside with other work too, but it's kind of led me to more of a systems look at the adults and then leaning into like adult social emotional learning and how, we ask our kiddos like, what is your social emotional learning, not competencies, but like how are they developing, but also how are teachers modeling social emotional learning? So I will say that's one area that I didn't think I was going to get into, but I think with research, like I mentioned, there's always this research practice gap that exists that speaks to then, after all of my research work, I hope to be able to calibrate the research practice gap a bit better and think through how research should be more accessible and be informed by practice and be bi-directional in that nature. Just being in this academic space, sometimes I think that what oftentimes can happen is researchers go into schools or classrooms, do their data collection, and they're trying to understand like bullying or school climate or teacher victimization, all these facets. And then we walk away with that data, publish a manuscript, present at conferences. But how does that come back to the school district or the school sites that we pull data from data, but in a way, we were getting insight and learnings from our youth and from our school community. So I really think about that in ways where we do a better job in trying to calibrate that relationship and be more in tune and connected in both directions and inform each other. Yeah, my answer in a nutshell.
I was going to ask James as well, since you completed your doctoral program. Go ahead,
Yeah,
James.
yeah. Yeah, I recently graduated, I guess 2022, so it's only been a couple of years from Loyola, University of Chicago. And the emphasis in that doctoral program was really about social justice, which I really connected with. And my capstone for my doctorate I did was all about the underrepresentation of students of color in gifted education programming. You know, while there's an overrepresentation of students of color and children from, homes where English isn't the first language in learning disabilities or even EBD courses, for the gifted population, there's an underrepresentation. And it's not because, they don't exist. It's because we're not finding them. We're not identifying them. So that work was really interesting to do and satisfying. And just recently, over the past 2 years in Palm Beach County, we're doing this thing now where we're screening. We're screening a lot more boys and girls, all of like all the kids in grade two. Every kid in grade two will be screened with a Nanette, the Naglieri Nonverbal Ability Test. And it's a great screener because it removes that whole thing about language. Do I know enough English? Have I assimilated enough into what we call American culture? Um, but we've been able to identify and find boys and girls who would not have been recommended for gifted testing by their teachers or even by their parents, because many parents don't know about gifted education or gifted programming. Now, when we work in Boca, all my parents know about gifted education. But when we work in other communities, they think, oh, my kid is doing great. He's getting good grades, which is wonderful. That's perfect. But we always want to teach kids at their highest potential, so they can access other programs and be prepared for those middle school and high school honors programs. Um, so again, that doctoral work looking at, reasons for the underrepresentation of students of color in gifted programming was it was well, I guess it was my favorite part of the doctoral program. So whatever you find that you're studying and something you're interested in now, plant that little seed, because you can do some research work and find out the reasons why and come up with solutions, because we were able to come up with solutions to solve that problem. And, over time, hopefully it'll be a remedy.
Thanks, James. I did want to ask, just very on a similar topic, Melissa, and also James and Queenie, you can also add, like, what made you decide to pursue doctoral study? So Melissa, since you just recently started, can you share a little bit about why?
I think I'm not gonna lie, it's a personal goal. I've always wanted to have the PhD. But as I'm sure, the doctoral candidates can tell you here, it's not enough. It's not enough to get you through it. There needs to be more to it. So in my situation, personally, I've always wanted to be a professor. That's the goal. My passion is teaching above all else. And so, what a better way to give back to the community than to become a professor and teach others, just how to do it right, right? Or better. So that's my personal goal. That's one of the reasons why I got into it. But I also like research. Like I never thought I would say that. But the more I get enthralled in it, the more I'm like, wow, this is actually really, really interesting. It's like a puzzle. And especially as school psychologists, like we kind of have to learn how like to enjoy testing, right? And so it's kind of like a story that you're writing when you're doing your evaluations, and research is in this, and it's very similar. Like you're trying to paint the picture um on a bigger scale. And it's been really, really eye-opening for me to work with other professors. And now, for example, we're doing a research study having to do with paraprofessionals and special education teachers and their roles, how to work together in the classroom. And as I'm sure a lot of you guys, if you're in the school system, like there's a huge tug of war there. So it's kind of interesting to get to know these teachers and ask these questions that you normally wouldn't have the opportunity to ask. But yeah, my main goal is to become a professor and give back and potentially help other professionals learn the better ways of teaching these students.
I'll chime in on that just because I feel like that was very similar in my decision making to Melissa's as far as like one never thought I was going to be, I don't want to say good at research, but had some like semblance of interest in research, but it was actually at FIU and working with our faculty and having had the opportunity to actually learn what research is about. And it was like something that I never thought I would see myself doing. And so that in itself made me motivated to think about the doctorate degree and, whether it was the PsyD or the PhD, the research component actually really sealed the deal for me is why the PhD made sense for myself. And then ultimately too, wanting to think about just potentially other pathways in the career. As a school psychologist, that's where I had my goals set. But then at the same time, I had just curiosity of like, what does that also look like if, pursuing a career in academia and all that, and unpacking sort of what type of like position I'd want in academia, whether, thinking of more research focused or a balance between research and teaching. That's something I'm still exploring to understand what that would feel and mean like for myself. But I think that it opens up a lot of doorways. And I would say too, with regards to the research component, like I think that we learn a lot of these things in our training when it comes to what is with a stamp of approval, what's research-based, what's evidence-based. But what pursuing the doctorate degree allows you to do is kind of step back a little bit from those learnings and inquire and be critical of those as well. And it's a very fine line, I realize, in research as far as like what our practices are saying are going to help our students, but also the research that is coming out always every so often to say whether or not we're on the right trajectory or not. And then ultimately informing policy too. I think about that as well as someone in school systems. We experience the impact and the impact of policies that are put in place, but yet how are they constructed and why do we feel the influence of disproportionality? Why do we feel these burnout experiences for a lot of our educational community members and things like that? So the research component, or if you're continuing to think about these ideas that I think firsthand in the account of your experiences, the research adds this like experience for you to look at it retrospectively and or be able to kind of unpack all that's been presented to you to consume and learn and do and like take a step back and kind of be more critical about that and realize, are we actually doing the right things that are supposed to be equitable for all our students and our families and things like that. Yeah.
Let's see. You notice I covered my head when you talked about the doctoral program because it is so much work. It's so much work and dedication, and you have really got to love what you're doing to get through it. After teaching, I had gotten my master's, and after I got my master's, I ended up getting my EdS from FIU, and I thought for sure I am done. I'm not going back to any one school ever again. But a few years, out from the program. I was just learning from other school psychs in my district who happened to, have doctorates. And I just saw how much they were respected and how much they knew and how people looked up to them, for leadership. And I love learning. I love the school environment. So it was a great fit for me. I chose to do the EDD route at Loyola and not the PhD route. Um, just because just because it really matched what I wanted to do. I wanted to continue to be a school psychologist in the school system, to build a private practice, to do some, adjunct professoring at schools. And it matched what I needed to do. but I do. I encourage all of you. When you finish your EDS, enjoy a year or two, get some experience under your belt. But really, if you feel, you know, the smallest desire, to add some letters behind your name, and you love research, you gotta love research. And the great thing about doctoral programs, and I'm assuming PhD programs, you really get to study what you want. Everyone gets to pick their own area of expertise. um, I've always been interested in the gifted program and gifted education and how boys and girls get in there. And it really just fueled my passion for it. So I do encourage everyone to pursue that if you like.
It's very interesting to hear in terms of research. I think a lot of you're looking more like systems level thinking versus as we think about traditional schools, like we're working with just one child, but then hearing about like social justice issues and working with teachers. Um, it's definitely, I think, changes and our roles a little bit, or at least our profession has evolved over time, as some of you mentioned, which is I think very inspiring too. And I think for those who are mentioning about pursuing the doctoral, I mean, you don't necessarily have to pursue a doctoral in order to engage as a lifelong learner, as you know. And I think it sort of goes to our sort of next question. That's just sort of a two-parter. So, what has been your favorite aspects of your work, and which aspects do you feel complicate or hold you back from professional development within your role?
I can chime in a bit about the best parts. Well, first of all, you kind of have to love kids to be in this job or like at least like them. And I really enjoy building those connections and like establishing rapport with the little ones and the waves in the hallway and things like that. I just think that's like enough to brighten your day on any day. But another thing, I think the thing that I find most fulfilling or rewarding is after working with a family and a child, you present your results and then the parent says, "Oh my God, that sounds just like my child." I feel like, okay, that means my job here is done. I captured the child in a way that is accurate to all at the table, all that know this child, that have worked with this child, work with this family. And that just is like, to me, that is like the best part of the job because working with the families, I think, can be the best part and the worst part. But at that moment is when I'm like, okay, I'm doing this for a reason. And then I think what was the second part of that? You're on mute.
And just told me I'm on mute. Thank you. What aspects do you feel complicate or hold you back from professional development in your role?
Timing. I think professional development is there. There's always a PD to go to ask about, to attend a conference, or this or that. It's there. It's just being able to have time for it while meeting some of, the deadlines and other complications, working within a school district at least. I think that's it, but I still take like any opportunity. If I don't have a case due this week, I'm going. I think it's really important to keep you like energized and like with it. Sometimes when I'm like burnt out and I'm tired and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? I go to a conference and I like forget everything I said before
I
that.
was just thinking, go to conferences could be a great way to learn, but
Yeah.
also enjoy a little bit. Yeah.
To have fun, right? Like I love going to conferences and I get a text from Dr. Pham and he's like, "Hi, I'm at the center of such and such." Like, it's nice to like network with other people, hear new research, like find new reasons to love the job. After a conference, you really feel like, "Man, Monday I'm gonna be the best school psychologist that ever was." So, yeah, I would say, just make time for it.
I'll go next, but I'm going to start with the negatives so that way I can end on a positive. So I would say the challenges that I've faced are not everybody is in education for the right reasons. And not everybody goes into it with the same excitement that we're going into it with. Um, and so sometimes it can be challenging when you get that person that you have to work with who's just like over it, to say, for lack of a better term. So that can be a challenge sometimes, and you really got to find a way to kind of work around it. And yeah, that's a challenge for me for sure, because sometimes I feel like, especially since I'm also doing my PhD, I'm constantly having these conversations like throughout the week about like things that we need to do. And so it's easy for me to go to work and be like, yeah, like okay, like I'm motivated, but not everyone is having that. You know, some people are going home and they have other things to do, and so it can be challenging. So definitely that's one of the challenges. Um, and then one of the positives is very much like what Renee said, like when you finally have that staffing meeting and the parent says like, yeah, you got it right. That's exactly my child. Like that feels so good because you're like, okay, I did it right. Another thing too is I'm working in the more urban schools, and it is like a personal, I guess it's just so personal for me because my grandparents came to this country from Cuba. And so, you know, I know that when they came to this country, they didn't speak the language, and it was very difficult for them to get the help that they needed because they didn't know the system. And so it feels so good when you get a family that, you know, has come from another country that doesn't know the system, and you basically teach them what their rights are, and you let them know, like, listen, like, this is the help that we're going to give your child. And some of them don't have insurance. Some of them, this is the first time they're even talking about you know, academic strengths and weaknesses. So for them, it's like they look at you like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like you're such a huge help. And so that is so fulfilling when I feel like, okay, I'm giving back to the community, but now I'm also like on a more personal level, I'm helping these people that have literally never had this help ever. And you're kind of like the start of the journey. So that's a huge, what's the opposite of a challenge? Why am I going blank now? Like one of the successes, I guess, of the job.
Wow. Can I follow Melissa?
Yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree with Melissa. I'll start with the challenge first. It is getting teachers sometimes to see research that maybe they haven't read or they didn't know or they didn't learn about in their training. And that's why the importance of building those relationships early on in the beginning of the year would be very helpful. The fact that I had a long teaching experience and I was able to connect with other teachers on that level, that was helpful. Um, because, you know, some teachers think they have a crystal ball and they can see some kid's future, and you can't. We don't know what this kid's future is. We just have to do, you know, what's best for them now. And use those evidence-based practices to hopefully get positive outcomes for them. So again, building those relationships is important because I'm thinking of a teacher that I worked with 3 years ago. She's so different now. She is totally different. Before she even comes to me, she'll come with data. She'll come like with a behavior sheet plan that we used before that she started with a new student. So it is great. It's great building capacity in other teachers. Um, and the success, of course, is just working with parents and families and getting parents to think differently, to see something differently in their child.
Okay, I guess I'll go last and then I'm gonna go over that question that was in the chat. So I think for PD is time. Definitely for me is time. A lot of times I'm doing training, so I'm preparing to present, and then, you know, and then I kind of lose out on opportunities for my own training. So it's funny you mentioned that because today I was thinking to myself, okay, I have to remember that I have to do some PD for myself. So it's always a good reminder. The other thing, just real quick, someone was asking, you know, in the chat about working with parents who may be defensive. I just want to stress the fact that, you know, this is sometimes the first time the parent is hearing that their child may have a potential disability. So there's a lot of emotion in that room. I've been, you know, I've been attacked aggressively by parents who didn't believe me, who thought I spent 5 minutes with their child. You know, I had after providing a comprehensive evaluation with, you know, several instruments. But regardless, the point is that this may be the first time they're hearing it. So you just have to try to remain calm. They're not lashing out at you. It's really at the situation. And I know it's hard because I was, I've been in that chair, but I just think, you just to be compassionate and just validating how difficult it is to hear that sometimes. And then just, depending on how that meeting goes, it's either, the meeting can be rescheduled for another time. You're just not going to engage in kind of that back and forth. So I think it's just important for you to remember that. And the only real quick thing I want to say, just because we're running out of time, I think, is to stay focused and remember why you're here. Because Melissa, you made a good point. You're going to have naysayers all around you. One thing I learned during my 17 years was that not under my watch am I going to let anyone influence what I do, right? I'm here for the kids. This is what I'm here for. That person may not care too much or be very, take decisions that are, just very lax, but not me. Not while I'm doing this that's not gonna fly under my ship. So I just want you to know that and just remain focused and just do what you're there to do.
Wonderful. Yes, you are correct. We are almost out of time. I did want to ask just a last question. Any words of advice for our future school psychologists?
Figure out what you're passionate about. Why are you here? What aspect of this is what keeps you going, and stick with it and don't forget it. And yeah, you really got to. I think that's a good place to take it. And then also be open to change. Like, you might start in the school system, but maybe you want to pursue something else, or maybe you want to work in private practice. This is a fluid kind of field. So yeah, don't ever feel like stuck. You can, do so much. We're so fortunate to have this particular degree.
And I go next. I would just say, to practice those, have those self-care practices in place and keep them routine, go for a walk, get some exercise, get some sun, all that good stuff you do to take care of yourself. And we talked about parents, how diverse the parents will be that you work with. You're going to come with parents who are really informed, who may even bring an attorney to the meeting, and parents who this may be their first time experiencing this type of school meeting. So just meet the parents where they are. Don't make assumptions if a parent is having difficulty getting there, because sometimes for some families, there are barriers to taking time off of work and coming in for a meeting. You might have to do something different for that parent. And my last bit of advice, this is a great book. I'm going to put the title in the chat box here. It's called The Listening Leader. This was one of the first books we read in our doctoral program, because you're going to find yourself at a table with maybe 10 or 12 other people, and they're going to be looking for you for leadership, because you're going to have more training, more expertise than a lot of the people sitting around that table in terms of making, eligibility type decisions for that child. So they're going to be looking at you and counting on you. And like someone said before, you don't want to be influenced by the principal who may just want to get the kid off the campus. You don't want to be influenced by the teacher who just may be a little bit tired of dealing with Johnny. You want to advocate what's best for that student. And the listening leader was really helpful in that, because at meetings, I like to do this. I like to do more listening than talking. So it's a great practice. I'll put the book in the title in the chat box. It's great.
Yes, please do. Thank you.
I'm going to say that my biggest piece of advice is try to stay adaptable, and maintain a strong sense of empathy. Being a school psychologist is obviously very demanding, but building relationship with your students and, seeing the impact of your work is honestly so rewarding. And that's going to give you also a sense of motivation as well without, even trying. But I would say never stop learning, and don't be so rigid, like be willing to, hear what someone else has to say with regard to how to do something, or anything really. And then also, whether it's through formal education or mentorship, or a self-study, try to continue evolving. And don't just stay stuck in what we learn, within the time that we're in grad school, because it's constantly changing. I think it was Queenie who said it before, but it's true. It's constantly evolving. Things are constantly changing. So you got to be constantly, willing to learn more.
So I'll say definitely, be open to those new opportunities that will enhance your way of work, your practice. And I think just, kind of just take everything you heard today and put it to practice. But like you're our future, you're my future, right? So in 10 years when I retire, one of you guys might be taking my role, my position. So I think, I love being a school psych. I've always been a school psych major. So I think, again, just, you learn as much as you can, you're open to new opportunities, you advocate for the students. Like James said, you're right. Sometimes you will be pressured to take a path that is not the right path. And you have to really be able to stand your ground because you're there to advocate for the student. You're not there for the parent. You're not there for the principal. You're not there for the teacher. You're here for the kids, right? So that's what you're going to do. That's
Well,
it.
just add to what everyone else has said, which I 100% agree with all that advice. I believe it all wholeheartedly. I think my piece of advice is just to be okay with the fact that sometimes you don't know everything. And I think that puts us in a position, like James had mentioned, they look to us as experts, and there are things we are trained to know, and we are able to make these decisions. And sometimes we don't know everything. I've just felt that a lot within the last couple of years of like, why am I always so uncomfortable feeling like I'm not knowing things? Mix of like, we could talk about imposter syndrome or not, but that in itself, and also just the idea, like I think we've kind of reiterated this throughout today's conversation about constantly learning and being open to new experiences and engaging in professional development. And with that is also saying that, we're not going to know everything all the time. And it's more about what do we do in those situations in which we lack maybe the skill sets or the knowledge or we lack something in which that could better serve our students and families, and what do we do about that for ourselves to be able to better meet those needs. So I think that's something that resonated with me saliently, at least the last couple of years. And I think it'll be an ever-growing experience. I'm just reminded by like also an evaluation I had very last day of my internship. And it was like, I felt good about evaluation. I was like, okay, completed a whole internship, great comments and feedback. But the one thing I just remembered, my internship supervisor noted on my like evaluation form, like, Queenie may not know everything. And I was like, what? When I read that, she's like, but those things come with time. And that's the key to it too. It's some things have to be lived through, and some things you just have to go through those processes, and you will learn through the experience of time. So yeah, can't hold that.
Wonderful words of advice and wisdom. Thank you. So a round of applause for our esteemed panel as we end. Thank you again. It makes me proud to be at FIU to hear everyone. So if you don't mind putting maybe your emails in the chat, or I can just forward everyone's emails to our students if it's okay, if our first year students, if they have additional questions. But otherwise, thank you all for attending, and yeah, have a great evening. Obviously, our class still stays, but our panel, you're welcome to
Everyone's
leave.
gonna sign off.
I'll take a break, but thank you again, panel. Have a great evening.
Thank
So good
you.
to see you
Bye.
guys.